Hello and welcome to Living the Dream for General Practitioners, the podcast for doctors and clinic leaders who want to learn about pathways, strategies and opportunities for living and working in Australia. Join me, Gemma Goff, and my expert guests as we share stories, unlock the secrets to recruitment success, share tips for moving across the world, navigating new cultures and so much more. This show is brought to you by Health Recruitment Australia. Now sit back, relax and enjoy this episode. Hi everyone and welcome to episode 6 of our GP Recruitment Fundamentals podcast series. Today I am delighted to be joined by Kym Nitschke from Nitschke Nancarrow. Kym is a chartered accountant, financial advisor and entrepreneur who lives and breathes the advice he gives his clients. Beyond his role as an accountant, Kym is a successful property developer, builder and business mentor. The keys to Kym's success lie in his ability to offer practical, wealth-building solutions for people in various circumstances. Kym's personable nature and passion for business, particularly within the small to medium business sector, have led him to pilot highly successful business mentoring programs. We are very lucky Kym has agreed to join us today and share some insights into how he and his team can assist GPs in setting up their business here in Australia to make the most of their money, whether through minimising tax, creating a retirement plan, or building business structure advice. Kym draws on decades of experience to develop prosperity plans. Kym, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks, Gemma. I'm looking forward to it.
I thought perhaps, Kym, we could start by you sharing with our listeners a little about yourself and how you came to be doing what you do so well.
Okay. Where do I start? I guess I've been working as an accountant for 30 years. I've loved every minute of it. I sort of came to the realisation that I love working with doctors when I was skiing at Falls Creek about 15 years ago. It was just a beautiful spring day and I was out on the summit snowboarding by myself and I was just brainstorming about my ideal client and it just came to me out of the blue that doctors were the perfect fit for my business, my personality and, my business model, I guess. And ever since then, I've sort of doubled down on my level of expertise in that space and my advice to the doctors and also, just built my whole business around that aspect of that sort of clientele.
Awesome. Thanks, Kym. So we're working hard at the moment to recruit GPs, bringing GPs in from primarily overseas as it happens that are looking to sort of gain back some of that work-life balance. And obviously the setup of businesses here in Australia is very different to that of overseas, the UK, for example, where the majority of GPs are employee doctors. So coming into Australia, they're required to set up their own businesses. How can you and your team help that and what's involved with that?
Yes, well, it's been quite an interesting journey and we sort of learnt a bit as we're going because the system is constantly evolving. But what generally happens is the doctors, let's just use the UK example, but they're coming from all over the globe, but the UK example is probably the best. And what happens is they sort of email us before they leave the UK and tell us that they're coming over. So we sort of line up when they lob in Australia to sort of try to liaise with them. But the first step, I guess, is that they need to get a tax file number. And the way that the immigration system operates is that as soon as they touch base in Australia, something happens at the airport where they land, and somehow the Australian Taxation Office knows that they're in the country, and it's then it opens up like a portal for me on my computer and I can go in and digitally apply for a tax file number for that doctor. That window closes as soon as they jump on the plane and leave the country. So while they're here, it's a great opportunity for them to apply for a tax file number. And that's step one. That usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks for that number to come through, and which is actually posted to me. Sometimes there's questions about, is it okay if I put down an Airbnb address? Where am I going to be? All of that sort of stuff. We sort of find that it's best for them to use our office as their registered address and mailing address because we don't want any documents posted out to their Airbnb once they've gone back to the UK. Once they're here, once we've got the tax file number, then the next step in that process is to apply for an Australian business number, which every small business needs to have. Then that will come through. That can be anywhere between 1 and 30 days for that to be issued as soon as we've got the tax file number. And then once we've got the Australian business number, then it's over to you, Gemma, and I'll let you know straight away. And then you can start the APRA registration from that date.
Amazing. What about things like opening bank accounts? How does that work from overseas?
Yeah, well, that's used to be really easy 5 years ago, but now with the anti-money laundering legislation, it's quite a difficult process. But we've got good connections with bank managers over here in Australia, so we have standard procedures. We've got online forms that they can fill out, and then there's a number of birth certificates, passports, things like that need to be certified and submitted to the bank as part of the application to open up a bank account. But yeah, we've systemized that process as well, and it's pretty important that that's opened up as soon as they start operating in Australia. But we can definitely get the lion's share work of that done before they actually start work. And I think that process takes with the bank, it used to be a couple of days, but I think it's sort of like 2 to 4 weeks as well.
It's really important. The GPs are really organised, really, aren't they, with those steps, and acknowledge that there's triggers to, you can't do one without doing the others. So really to lean on you guys for advice is really important.
Yeah, as you can imagine, with this whole process, you do have the odd doctor who tries to do it themselves, and that, it's actually quite complex. And if they answer one question incorrectly, it sort of stuffs the whole thing up. And it's 10 times harder to fix it once it's been done incorrectly than if it's just all done seamlessly and correctly right from the get-go.
Sure. And what about superannuation? If they had come from being employee doctors overseas to then setting up their own business, how would they go about opening a super account?
Okay, so that's, let's just start with whether it's compulsory or non-compulsory. I think that's confusing for a lot of the doctors when they first arrive in Australia. It's totally voluntary to make contributions to super, which is sort of confusing because it's compulsory as an employee back in the UK. So it's really up to the doctors whether they actually want to take out the superannuation or not. If they do, and a lot of them do, and we sort of encourage it, it's best just to open up an account with an industry fund in Australia, very straightforward process, and then just to set up a direct debit each month of a set amount into that superannuation fund.
Makes sense. So we've got sort of various pathways that GPs can come into Australia on, and whether they want to be an employee doctor, whether they want to be an independent practitioner, or whether they want to become GP partners in the future, own a share of a practice or be sole owners. From your experience working with the GPs, which sort of pathway do you think is most sensible for them to initially come into Australia on, and then sort of progress if they want to?
Well, I think the most popular route for them to go is as a GP in private practice. That seems to sort of have the most flexibility and the most benefits. Obviously, there's plenty of opportunity to get a job, for example, like SA Health or something like that. But I think that they'll find that they actually make more money working out in clinic, such as the clinics that you're associated with. And there's also flexibility for them to do overtime, which gives them a big revenue increase if they're happy to work outside of normal 9 to 5 hours. I guess a lot of doctors don't want to do that if they've got young families, but for those that have got the flexibility to do that, they will be richly rewarded.
Sure. And what's the earning potential, sort of the differences between the sort of employee doctor versus a GP partner, for example, or an independent practitioner?
Yes. Now, I knew you were going to ask me this question, so I did some research last night. I think if you actually work with SA Health, I've got some rates here. It's grabbing them on my... yes, here we go. So a junior medical officer can earn anywhere between 80 and 140,000. A senior medical officer is about 140,000 to 210. And then a senior consultant is 220 to 285. And then if you're a senior consultant, you can have a package of 500 to 650. Now that sounds a little bit high, but anyway, the standard GP then, on the other hand, in private practice can earn between about 200,000 and 400,000. If they're happy to do work outside of business hours and weekend work, that can be anywhere up to 600,000.
Yeah, right. So quite a difference then. And they get the flexibility then of being an independent practitioner, like you said, that they can work the hours that suit them and their family. You know, if they want to work part-time and then the same as a full-time income, perhaps by working those out of hours is obviously of benefit to them too. Yeah, super. So how do taxes work here in Australia, Kym? So for an employee doctor versus a self-employed and again a GP partner, what are the differences that GPs that are looking to move to Australia should consider?
Okay, so an employee doctor, I mean, the tax treatment is relatively straightforward and everything's basically done for you. So out of every fortnightly or monthly pay packet, you will have, approximately 30 to 40% deducted and sent off to the tax office on your behalf. So when you get your pay, you get a net amount, which is after tax has been taken out. Usually, the employer will pay super on top of your pay as part of your package, and that's just sent straight off to the superannuation funds, usually industry funds, depending on whether you're working for a hospital or whether you're working privately. There's some great superannuation funds like SSS, which has got advantages. You actually get your money goes in there and there's no tax taken out until you leave at the end, which is bizarre, but they get a couple of benefits because they're a government superannuation fund. But most super funds, when your money goes in, 15% tax is taken out and put aside, and then 15% tax is taken out when you take it out, apart from if you access it when you're over 60. There's no tax taken out on that. I think, does that answer your question on... Oh, sorry. No, the other, I didn't talk about the sole trader type independent GPs. Now, what happens with their tax is there's no tax taken out of the payments made to them every fortnight or month by the clinic. What actually happens is, say they work from July, well, our financial year is 1 July to 30th of June here. So they'll work the full year from July to June, and then their tax won't be due until the 15th of May the year after. So there's a massive delay in actually sending their tax off to the tax department after they've actually earned their income. So there's opportunity there to actually park that tax that you would have earmarked against your mortgage or whatever you want to do with it, but you just can't actually spend it on a holiday or anything like that because the tax man's going to have his hand out expecting something somewhere down the track.
Absolutely. Financial benefits, then, Kym, for GPs, is there anything particular that you think they should have on their radar?
Sorry, what do you...
Sort of, the possibilities of, getting a mortgage perhaps for their first house when they get here, the sort of things that maybe being a GP kind of sets them apart from other professions, that they could have earning loan capacity.
Yes, okay, I'm with you now. Sorry. Yeah, just to clarify, if someone moves over and they're on a temporary visa, it's almost impossible to get a loan. As soon as they become a permanent resident, then the banks will welcome doctors with open arms. It's a bizarre system here. I'm not sure what it's like borrowing money in the UK, but I think it's fair to say that doctors in Australia are the most preferred customer by banks. They get their own special set of rules when borrowing money. So a doctor, when they walk into a bank, unlike everyone else who needs, generally speaking, a 20% deposit, a doctor only needs 10% deposit. So they can buy a property relatively easier. And if they buy a clinic, they don't even need a deposit. The bank will finance 100% plus equipment. So there's very encouraging rules on the behalf of bankers to welcome doctors with open arms. I'd be suggesting purchasing a property given how real estate's gone in Australia as soon as possible. I think that there's a temptation. I know that, well, we might as well talk about cars as well. I think you only need 2 pay slips over here and the bank will lend you enough money to buy a car. So very, very easy to buy a car, a little bit harder to buy a house. You need a deposit, albeit only 10%. But property prices have been very strong and continue to improve over here. And I'd be suggesting that the doctors use that as a way of wealth creation. The biggest loophole in the tax legislation in Australia is that any gains on your house, or what we refer to as your principal place of residence, are tax-free. So you can buy it, live in it, enjoy it, and then if it doubles in value in 7 to 10 years, any money that you make when you sell it is tax-free. That's really well the only loophole in the legislation. Everything else you have to pay tax on, apart from the house that you live in.
Awesome. That's great to know. Great to know. So GPs, they've arrived into Australia, they've set up their business, they're starting to consult patients, they've bought a house, they've got themselves a car. Now they're sort of looking at their bank account thinking, okay, well, I've got a little bit of money here. I'm thinking maybe time to invest or, do some financial planning. What would be their next step? What sort of considerations should there be?
Well, I think that the financial planning is a great way to go. And, as Albert Einstein said, the 8th wonder of the world is compound interest. And Warren Buffett says it's like a snowball effect. So the sooner you start investing and putting money aside and it starts accruing interest, the better off you're going to be. Now, I'd be encouraging doctors as soon as they can to be putting money aside into superannuation. And it's really a case of working out what they can afford without impeding on their current standard of living. But I think it's very important that you put money aside for retirement and you start thinking from that sooner rather than later. There's some statistics from the Barefoot Investor, who is quite famous over here as being a bit of a guru on finance. He sort of suggested that if you, and this is the extreme, this is more for children, but it still applies to young doctors starting out. But if you put $5,000 a year away from the ages of 15 to 25, so for at 10 years, and you get a 10% return, that money will be worth $2.7 million by the time you reach 65. And as he's saying that if you do that for 10 years and you stop at 25, you don't need to do any more investing for the rest of your life. You'll have enough to retire on. So his big mantra is that, when you're trying to set yourself up for the future, the most important factor to consider is the benefit of time. And, using that to the full advantage. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think that putting money aside for superannuation is really important. But another approach that doctors can take is that they can buy an investment property. How are we running for time? Can I tell you a little story?
Absolutely.
I'll just tell you the story about my mechanic, Zach. He's a lovely guy. He's been repairing my cars for the last 10 years. And he's the sort of guy that if he's fixing up my car and it takes him 8 hours, he'll only charge me for 3 because, when he's sitting down with me, he'll say things like, it was something really straightforward. It took me 8 hours, but I'm only going to charge you for 3 because I should have actually known where to find it. And it was pretty obvious once I'd worked it all out. So he came up to my, I've got a farm up in the Adelaide Hills and there was a bushfire heading towards it. And he rang me out of the blue and said, there's a bushfire. Do you want me to come and help? And I said, oh, that'd be lovely. So he came up there and we sat on the deck, and the fire didn't actually get that close to my farm, but we just had a talk, and he brought up, it was sort of a really inspirational, it was a sort of a heart-to-heart talk, because he was actually risking his life effectively, helping me defend my property. Not that it came to that, but he was prepared to do that. And I was really touched by that. And he said to me, look, I'm really worried about my financial future. I think that I'm going to have to go on the pension because I don't have enough when I'm going to retire. And he's a crane operator during the day. But I said to him, look, the best bet for you is to buy your neighbour's property. And then he said, well, would you help me do that? And I said, yeah, I'll look into it. So I did a search, and I found that it was owned by a Italian family. And I knew that, I said to him, look, don't get your hopes up, because generally speaking, Italians are very good with properties and they very rarely sell. So we didn't get too excited. But fast forward 2 years, and his daughter was driving home from nursing school, and she noticed a for sale sign up there. So he told me, so I got in contact with the agent. The property went to auction 2 weeks later, and I bought it. The reserve was $950, and I bought it at auction for him for $865. I organised the finance through a mortgage broker. So we got it for a bargain, and I put the agent through his paces. Like, I used every negotiation trick that I've learned over my 30 years to screw him down on price. And I was comfortable we got a good price. And I got finance for $1 million. So he had, $100,000 after stamp duty up his sleeve for renovations. We had a 3-month settlement. He's owned it for 6 months now. He's organised some buddies to go in and gut the place, and he's put in new floors, new ceilings, new architraves, new doorways, new bathrooms, new kitchen, and it's cost him, using his mate, $150,000. So it sort of owes him 1.1 million, or maybe just a little bit over that. Anyway, the agent drove down the street and dropped in and said to him, I could get you 2.1 for this.
Wow.
So he's made $1 million in effectively 9 months. And I really feel like I've played a big part in that. So I'm really excited about it. And my sister, who's an interior designer, she got the idea for a new floor plan at 4:00 in the morning and drafted it all up and did a storyboard and did photos of all these houses that she wanted to, roll into this sort of concept design. So he's just run with it. And so that's, property hasn't gone crazy in the last 9 months. That's just thinking outside the square. And that's made him $1 million.
That's incredible. Absolutely awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so good. So good.
Yeah, it's motivational for me, as
for
well.
Sure,
because
for sure.
I know that.
And that was going to be one of my questions, Kym, was that, you're a busy man. You're juggling lots of plates with your property portfolio, your accounting business, the cars, all the other things that you're doing at the moment. Doctors, are looking to move to Australia to regain some quality of life, just be able to spend time with their families and sort of get their priorities back in check. It's not all about work. So what advice can you give them from personal experience about getting that balance between, living a comfortable life versus, ensuring that your business goals are met?
Yeah, so I think that family comes first, 100%. You just see so many doctors and accountants, for that matter, that just work their butts off. They're never home. Their kids need their parents to be around 100% as much as they can. So I'm just talking from my own experience, but I think it's really important to work around that, because they're little for such a short period of time, and it's so important. They hang on your every word, and being there 24 hours to them is not enough. So I want to emphasize to the doctors that it's so important to spend time with your family, and then spend time being creative in what you do outside of work. So, you never really get rich out of an hourly rate or working for someone, no matter what your hourly rate is. There's so many costs, and effectively the ATO, they're a business partner of all of us. We all have to pay tax, and after you've paid all of your bills and you've paid your tax, there's never a lot left. So what my mantra has always been is that I'd always try to have investments, whether that's superannuation or property, on the side. And I would be trying to actively monitor that so that while I'm sleeping, my property portfolio is increasing in value. Whether I get out of the bath or not, my value of my net wealth, my assets, is constantly growing. And so every year, 1st of January, I'm so excited. I'm disappointed for a couple of reasons that, I'm getting older and, my youth is becoming a thing of the past. But I'm so excited because I know that every year my properties are going up in value. And my own personal situation is I've got 8 properties and they've all got similar stories to Zach's story that I told you before. And I think that it's important that the doctors realise that needs to be run alongside of being a busy, successful doctor. That your income that you earn as a doctor needs to be viewed as a vehicle for convincing the bank to lend you money to invest.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it works really, really well. And, the first 1 or 2 houses are the hardest to get. Everyone thinks that the first house is everything. And when they sell it, they roll that into the next one. But the key that I've found is don't sell your first house, borrow extra to buy the second house, use the money that you've made in the first house as a form of deposit or equity in your next house. And if you can sit down and you get it clear in your own mind and you explain it to the bank, they love you, they'll give you the money. And then it all starts from there, because instead of having one house going up in value, you've got that double leverage with 2 houses.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Great advice. Is there anything else, Kym, that you think we should share with GPs that are either in Australia looking to make improvements or those coming from overseas? And any top tips from an accounting perspective? Anything we haven't covered?
I just think that we live in the greatest country in the world. I had to travel around the world to realise how amazing it is here. We've got amazing beaches. You can live. It doesn't. You don't have to be a billionaire to live on the beach in Australia. The other thing that when you travel through Europe, you come back here and you can realise we can have a farm, which you can't do in a lot of places in the world. And we've got high-speed internet, international flights, the best seafood, the best food in the world here. It's very economical to live here. I just absolutely love living in South Australia. I think that for any doctor, you need to come over here and check it out and realise how good we've got it.
As do I. Best move we ever made. Kym, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you again for giving up your valuable time. If there are GPs on their journey to migrate at the moment and perhaps they've listened to this podcast and realised they could benefit from your services, how can they get in touch?
Well, my last name's quite complicated, so don't try to find my business. I've got a podcast called The Accounting Insider, so that's probably the best way to find me. And there's links in the show notes on how to email me and reach out to me. So
amazing. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. And thanks to everyone for listening. As always, we hope there has been some value in what we've shared with you today. And it assists you on your journey to a brighter future here in Australia. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Living the Dream for General Practitioners. Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. At Health Recruitment Australia, we want to see more happy GPs, thriving medical practices and healthy communities. If you'd like to join us on our mission, visit healthrecruitmentaustralia.com.au to explore opportunities and get in touch. Thanks for listening.